a non-Warlock lineup coming up with gogongsing from South Korea up against Tredsred from Japan, two veterans of the HCT team.
Yeah, and not only that, but talking about the lineups in general, two odd cost hunter decks in the lineups. There are only 3 in the entire tournament, as Dan had pointed out to me, and that is just astonishing to see. Two very strong players as well, giving you a little bit of top down from their resume. Gogongsing was at the Winter and Spring Playoffs in 2017. In 2016, he had a top 8 at both Last Call and the Southeast Asia Majors in Thailand and Malaysia. And in 2015, he qualified for the HWC Korea tournament as well. Tredsred has a top 12 at the 2017 Spring Championships. He was top 8 at, this year at the Tour Stop in Taipei, and he was also top 12 in Bangkok as well. So been having some pretty good resumes for these guys over the years.
Yeah, that was definitely a lot to digest if you're just kind of listening to results. But both these players have been around for multiple years. Tredsred has the most notable appearance at Shanghai last year when he was just on the cutoff. And also, Tredsred is a renowned aggro player. He loves playing aggressive deck strategies, so it's not surprising to see him bring an all-out aggressive lineup. But gogongsing also, he's the one bringing a very interesting aggressive lineup as well. Odd Rogue probably is one of their more similar decks, but they still have very differences in opinions. Like, for example, Tredsred has this one card in his hand called Tangle Fur Mystic. Why are we playing that in all of our aggro decks here for Tredsred?
Well, it's a good thing to look at, and it's really important to note that 3-4 stat line is very common across this lineup. And something that I think that he was thinking about was that the 3-4s in a lot of the matchups where he expects aggressive decks to just perform well, is that the 3-4s line up very well against the other aggressive decks. You tend to bring a lot of 3-3s. So you think about Blink Fox in gogongsing's deck, for instance. Tredsred's got 3-4s in those places. So his goal is to generate some amount of tempo at some step along the way and have that result in additional damage.
Yeah, it's tough for, Quest Rogue to remove it because they just don't have very good damage removal for 3-4s. Survives things like Hellfires if you have to end up playing against Warlock. So a lot of these 3-4s are just well statted. I think that's anything we learned from Totem Golems, that early tempo with 4 health can often swing the board enough to snowball your way to a victory.
Yeah, and it's pretty wacky to see Tredsred with a Black-Walled Pixie of all the minions in his odd cost rogue deck. You get almost no benefit from this card's battle cry ever, but it is strictly the 3-4 stat line that he's hoping will carry him over the mark. Now, something to mention in this matchup, though, is that a lot of times it does boil down to tempo. Landing minions that can swing around the board is a very important measure. And the Bilespine Slayer here is going to be a lot for Tredsred to overcome, but a second Hench Clan Thug is one of the cards that may be able to put him in a damage lead as well with Leroy Jenkins in his hand.
Yeah, I think even though this is a fairly aggressive matchup, both these players are playing so quickly that by the time we've set the scene, the game's already happened. Yeah, we're trying to just describe and break down how matchups and deck lists differ because it might look like a mirror at the surface. But in reality, there's a pretty big difference in decks. And now that we've kind of slowed down, we'll see how Tredsred reacts to this because he was on the proactive plan. But has he dealt enough damage to continue to push the knife, or does he have to play reactive and address the board here, Admirable?
Well, notice that he did reach for the Iron Begal on this spot, which is really interesting to me because the SI7 agent plus the dagger will take out the Hench Clan Thug. And so for a moment, I imagine he ran the numbers on actually attempting to race this Hench Clan Thug by simply silencing it away. But this just looks like such a more efficient play.
Well, look at what Tredsred got. One of the things that you don't calculate in aggressive mirrors is healing, especially if a deck has no healing. But Squashling introduces a very new dynamic where Tredsred can play a little bit slower, perhaps, if he wants to remove, or just give him just enough life to push tempo and out of the range of his opponent's burst while setting up a lethal himself. Yeah. Very big pickup for Tredsred if it ends up going down that route, which it looks like it will because Tredsred has that life lead and can leverage his health as a resource a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, and with Leroy Jenkins in hand, it encourages you to race, and that same thing goes for gogongsing here as well. Squashling is a 2-mana 2/1 Echo, restore 2 health. So he can play it as many times as he has 2 mana available to him. It's a very weird card that we saw make its way in some of the Priest decks last week in America's playoffs. Yeah. But really the big story here, I think, is these Vilespine Slayers pulling so much weight in the matchup right now.
Double Vilespine Slayers destroying Tredsred's tempo. And this is kind of awkward because Tredsred has very situational cards that depend on the board or the game state, which is charges for burst or removal or ways to be defensive. This is not exactly the ideal setup. Is there a way for Tredsred to perhaps get aggressive in this spot because he realizes that he has no way to win back the board?
Well, I'm kind of eyeing that Squashling and when that can come into play. You know, the fact that it swings back 6 health in his favor and puts 3 2-1s on the board if he were to use that, that is a lot of stuff going on where gogongsing then looks at his hand and maybe doesn't have a strong 2-turn lethal setup in the fear of being counter-lethal. You know, Cold Bloods are still in this deck. He still has to account for the opposing Leroy. There's a number of ways this deck can assemble damage. So I am curious not only how Tredsred takes his turn, but how gogongsing responds to it.
Yeah, it might be important. Leroy and the Cold Bloods is 14 burst for 7 mana, plus the 7, or rather 9 onto the board. So that's, what, 23 damage you have to account for? And Tredsred's just outside that range now that he's eliminated 3 damage on the board that would take anyways. So if gogongsing can't burst for exactly that damage, Tredsred has the ability to go aggressive and leverage his Fungal Mant or the Leroy to end the game.
And at 14 life, gogongsing looks at the situation and thinks if Tredsred's got Leroy Coldblood, he needs to kill at least 2 minions on board.
Right.
And this is starting to slow the game down a bit, but his utility in hand, I just think, is so strong. You know, the thing about Tanglefleur Mystic is your opponent gets a 2-cost minion as well.
Right, and you have to account for that.
And having the Ravasaur run gives him some utility play here. Right. You know, he sees what the result is from the Adapt, and then he's able to mold his game plan afterwards. And so he gets fairly what's the word I'm looking for here? Where it doesn't really matter that much. Irrelevant, I guess. The adapt is fairly irrelevant, so I think in his eyes, you can just play the slow game plan again and rely on having the board lead to really do that.
It could be important. Let's say that he got taunt and then he Fungal Mant to build the board presence. That's where I think it does become a lot more important, because then Tredsred has to have Owl, and that reduces his burst. But, I mean, I think gogongsing's done a really good job of setting this up so far, but Tredsred's 1 Cold Blood from ending this game. Which could be what comes down to.
It's important to know that gogongsing just does not have the damage to actually end the game next turn, I don't believe, unless the Vicious Fledgling is able to pick up Wind Fury. And so what that means is Tredsred's going to have another turn to draw Cold Blood.
That's assuming gogongsing doesn't draw damage himself. If he draws Cold Blood, the game is over.
Yes, but you know, it's all from Tredsred's perspective here. He's looking at this board, he's calculating it as much as he can. He doesn't have the liberty of really playing around too much. Maybe Ironbeak Owl just to you know, take away the lethal hit potential from Vicious Fledgling, and outside of that, just literally look for Cold Blood at this point. I mean, he's got to have to get lucky if he's going to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, there are other ways he can piece together damage. Say he puts the 2 damage to his opponent, sets him at 10. He still has an out for SI7 agent, for example. Oh, he doesn't. He has to redagger. So if Tredsred chooses to redevelop at this point, his outs do become very limited, like you said.
SI would still be lethal. If he puts 2 to face, it sets gogongsing to 10, and he'd have a dagger plus Leroy in the owl. Or the Fungal Mancer to go with. The Leroy also activates the combo as well.
Okay, so you're saying holding on to that.
Yeah, I don't expect him to Leroy this turn, although you know, there is some chance it's possible. And he's not going to silence the Vicious Fledgling.
Oh my goodness, this could be a huge punish from gogongsing if this Vicious Fledgling is able to pick up Wind Fury. 30% chance based off the Adapt discovers.
Yep, because gogongsing does not have the mana to use Fungal Mancer and Leroy this turn.
Right.
And so it is down to an Adapt on whether or not he wins the game this turn or Tredsred has another shot.
You could also get taunted to get in the way, and that does complicate the math here for Tredsred, but that's perhaps why he held onto the Owl.
That is
just
exactly
in case he needs to get past 1 single taunt.
Yep, and now with the Owl in hand, the Cold Blood is the lethal out. Gogongsing can no longer protect himself against that potential, and so it boils down to the draw. You know, even despite 2 Vilespine Slayers, Tredsred was able to assemble enough damage to at least threaten gogongsing.
I mean, that's just the power of being on the play. Compared to your opponent, you get to be proactive in your threats, set the pace. But gogongsing looks like he's 1 turn away from swinging this game and potentially getting a 1-0 victory. That's not it. And I think that's just game because there's too much pressure onto the board. Baku, the worst possible draw, even though you can play as a 9 mana 7/8, it's not going to do anything in this position.
Yeah, he needed Cold Blood exactly, and he can't slice away enough damage to still assemble a counter assault. gogongsing 1-0 in this archetype mirror match, but very different decks considering that.
Yeah, and the 3 mana 3/4s would traditionally do really well to fight against the board. Just look at what's in the deck for the early game. Fireflies, Dire Moles, Ironbeak Owls. These are things that crumble on the weight of 3/4s. They can take 2 or maybe 3 cards off of you before you're able to fight back efficiently, unless you want to use your dagger hit, in which case you're getting 3 damage onto your opponent's health. So all of that was supposed to be going all nice and well, but the caveat is that when Rogue is on the coin, they can squeeze out these big combo plays, such as the Vile Spine Slayer. And you pointed out, double Vile Spine was the back-breaking board swing, and Tredsred figured out I had to go face and try to push the damage. Unable to land it, though, because just not enough turns to get to that point.
Yeah, it's just gogongsing recognizing that he doesn't need the explosive starts, he needs to just squelch the assault. So able to capitalize with the double Vile Spine Slayer.
Yeah, so what's the weak point of the lineup, do you think? In the mirror, one of the biggest questions is, I'm going to assume that my decks can win specific matchups, like if I can win even Paladin versus all these decks, that's going to be good. That ends up getting banned. So now when this all changes, what do you think might be the big matchup that we're looking at? Was it already happening with the Odd Rogue, you think?
Well, Odd Rogue is certainly a big question mark, but to me, it's the odd cost hunter. This deck is one that has not performed historically very well, either in ranked play or in tournaments thus far. Green Sheep brought it to the European playoffs, and he had a fairly abrupt exit while he was there. And these two odd cost hunter decks are also built wildly differently. There's different number of 1-drops. Tredsred has stacked very tall onto the 3-drop slot. And just the approach that they both have is very different. Once again, with Tredsred looking for the 3/4s to be a big difference maker, and for gogongsing, he's relying much more on early pressure with a pair of Wolf Riders, extra 1-drops in the mix, and really none of the 3/4 action that Tredsred is valuing so highly.
Yeah. We're not going to see the Hunter come out from Tredsred, which is what we're talking about. gogongsing has the odd face warrior, the one that tries to be super aggressive, plays 11 1-mana cost minions, and then also has arcane shots and trackings to help supplant that mana curve and push out as much damage as possible. And again, Tredsred will be going for this odd rogue to try and establish board, and that's quite a good hand against Hunter to start things off here for Tredsred. But the question is he going to stabilize on the board fast enough before Hunter dealt too much damage with its hero power and its minions?
I definitely think he has one of the key cards to the matchup, which is Hench Clan Thug. You need something that not only survives a lot of the counter pressure that gogongsing can apply, but also something that clocks your opponent very quickly. From the get-go, he's staring down a 3-damage hero power on the other side. Now, the rogue hero power gives him a 2/2 dagger, which is 4 damage for 2 mana, but it takes you a couple of turns to unlock that. I think it's one of the reasons why gogongsing has gone with a more 1-cost heavy build, is because he doesn't necessarily anticipate having the mana available to him to do everything he wants. He's really trying to leverage the 3-damage hero power. So for Tredsred, it is about squelching that assault and then counter pressuring as quickly as possible.
Not too much data on Odd Hunter. I was trying to pull it up myself and see if there's any solidified deck stats, but for the most part, Odd Rogue has traditionally done well against aggro decks outside of Paladin.
And here, I'd love to see Tredsred actually coin out this Firefly. I think that with his hand, he's pretty set up to be playing a turn 2 hero power, wiping up the Dire Mole to try to shut off kill command and whatnot, and then looking for the Hench Clan Thug right afterwards, and then get the dagger going with poison.
Yes, agreed. There's no real benefit of holding onto the coin in the surface level. Oh man, gogongsing with a pretty bad scenario right here. All 3 mana minions. Look at his face. He's devastated by his hand right now.
He's trying to figure out how he wins this game. He kept Eagle Horn Bow, and honestly, versus Tredsred, this is a card that I am somewhat questioning keeping. Again, he is stacked on the 3/4 stat line. Blackwalled Pixie, he's got Animal Companion, Nightmare Amalgam, Tangle for a Mystic, and that's just in his Hunter deck. But his Rogue deck shares the exact same similarity. Tangle for Mystic, Nightmare Amalgam, the Hench Clan Thug, Blackwalled Pixie. I'm not convinced that Eagle Horn Bow is necessarily a keep in this matchup, and the Wolf Rider, it is definitely going to get chopped down with how many 1-cost, 1-attack minions that Tredsred has.
Well, gogongsing is playing a lot more the aggressive list in general, but we will keep in mind those 3-mana 3/4s, because it's very clear that with gogongsing's hand, he's not going to win the board. He has all his finishers. All this is just damage. So if it was 6 from the Eagle Horn Bow, Kill Command, Wolf Rider, you get halfway there. But that's assuming that your opponent lets you win the board.
Winces again at the side of Hench Clan Thug. This is probably the scariest minion gogongsing can see right on turn 3.
Yikes.
And Candle Shot is about as close to dead as you get at the moment.
I mean, I think that maybe at this stage, if I'm gogongsing, I'm not even worried about board. From turn 3 onwards, I knew I was never going to win it.
He's got to just push, I think. Wow, that is a very risky attack to be making at this stage. It makes a lot of sense because he does, this is probably the one clock that he has to attempt to shut off, but this is a really bad feeling.
Well, Rogue is guaranteed. Oh man, you know the rogue is definitely guaranteed to at least attack with a dagger to pump it up. But this cold blood draw is even more damage. Do we cold blood or do we establish a bigger board? It's actually kind of close.
Here.
It's actually kind of close.
My opponent just tanked it with his face, and if he's going to use another card to take care of that.
But he equipped Candle Shot, so you know that the cold blood's effectiveness is not as good as traditional weapon scenarios against Warrior, for example.
Yep. Maybe he's influenced by the deck build from gogongsing here as well. There is only one copy of Unleash the Hounds in gogongsing's deck, and so it is a fairly unlikely punish at that point.
Yeah.
I think that influenced Tredsred play there a little bit.
Well, the Argent Squire is the setup for the cold blood as well. The goal is to try to make this cold blood do at least 8 damage. And also, the Argent Squire sets up for the better Fungal Mancer. So I think, given that we have 2 reasons and 1 against compared to 1 reason, 1 against for the other play, I think ends up giving a better percentage for Tredsred, potentially.
It's looking good for him either way. Just Henge Clan Thug. I mean, it already dealt 9 damage in this game, and it staved off 5 damage as well. That is a massive difference considering how close the life totals are.
Well, let's say Tredsred adds the damage right here. So let's say he plays Flame Elemental, Cold Blood, and then redaggers and goes Deadly Poison. That's 5 plus 4, so it's 9. And then you have Salty Deckhand, Fungal Mancer for the lethal.
He's setting up a 2-turn clock that he's anticipating being uncounterable from gogongsing, unless he wants to invest more of his damage directly into board. And if gogongsing has to do that, he's pretty much squelched out of the game at this point.
Odd Rogue is so quick at bursting and leveraging any existing board into massive damage, even to the point where gogongsing has to take damage himself to establish any board presence. And that, I believe, should just be the end of the game. Salty Deckhand and the Fungal Mancer in tandem with the 4 damage Deadly Poison should be enough to just end the game at 8 itself, on top of the fact that the Flame Elemental gets buffed. But we knew that Odd Rogue is pretty good at killing aggressive decks that aren't Paladin, so this was kind of an expected result. The question becomes, as you're mentioning, can the Odd Hunter squeak out a win? And more importantly, how does Temple Mage work into the mix too? Because they also are vulnerable to aggressive strategies.
Yeah, Manowar Mage is probably my second mark in terms of questions for these players, right behind the Hunter. We saw Muzzy perform very well with Odd Cost Rogue last week, and a number of players have been putting up pretty decent performances with it, just not quite getting through to championships with the lineup. You have to look at the numbers overall, though. I think Odd Cost Rogue is quite strong. In an aggressive lineup, it really makes sense. My question is, does the aggressive lineup make as much sense?
It really takes advantage of anybody that's playing Temple Mage or Quest Rogue, things that are pretty vulnerable to those very fast explosive starts and don't really benefit too much off of a counter spell on a very cheap spell, So I think for the most part, we're gonna see if the series is gonna develop beyond just that Temple Mage or just that Odd Hunter. But more action is gonna be coming your way after we return to the HCT APAC Summer Playoffs. Round one of the Hearthstone Championship Tour stop in Asia-Pacific as we continue our playoffs. Gogongsing and Tredsred tied at 1 game apiece, with Odd Rogue being favored against most of the lineup here. I think when you play a mirror, you try to get the best matchups first and then move backwards from there. Now we move to a Mana Worm Mage mirror, and both players start with Mana Worm. So who has the edge? Is the player with the coin the extra card, or is it the player who gets the initiative with the Mana Worm?
Goodness, this is always a tough one to call for me. You know, attacker's initiative definitely means a lot, but the extra card for Tredsred, I think, gives his hand a lot of different potential for it. You know, one of the things that you need with Mana Worm too is you want a mix of the right number of minions and spells. You know, having to keep Mana Worm and then hope that your deck provides afterwards, there is always a risk to it, but you do have the attacker's advantage. And so for Tredsred, it's offsetting that. And so having Mana Worm and then having Frostbolt is a really big deal for that, because if Gogongsing's going to kill this Mana Worm, it's got to use the Arcane Missiles, which takes away his Sorcerer's Apprentice turn sometimes, because, you know, sometimes he has to ping in order to get it done. He is going to miss that, but I think that's a risk he's willing to take here.
If this Arcane Missiles just completely misses the Mana Worm,
ooh, now second Mana Worm drawn.
I think Sorcerer's Apprentice is better tempo.
I would have liked to see Gogongsing think a lot more about that, and he winces, and I think that means
2, 3 to the face.
Mama.
That is devastating, but he still gets a pretty good proactive bump onto the Mana Worm, so it can't just easily take a value trade on the Mana Worm.
Yeah, but it is going to get some value here, and this is probably the worst situation that Gogongsing could have run into.
Yes.
And in fact, I'm going to quite just outright say that is the worst situation he could have run into.
That's right.
But he does have 2 life drinkers, which continue to require attention for Tredsred, and they provide a bit of a health swing. So
does that that was like a what 1-8 to happen exactly like that? So
it's a 50% chance and a 25% chance and a 12.5% chance for all 3 to go face.
Jeez. Well, the Explosive Runes is going to remove this life drinker, so the tempo is continued again. But here's the problem for Tredsred. He needs more than just spells to win this game. He's not playing Freeze Mage. Sorcerer's Apprentice, definitely a welcome sight for Sore Eyes, because he can remove the Mana Worm, set up his own counter spell.
He's going to think a little bit about this too, because right now the Sorcerer's Apprentice does contest the Mana Worm also.
Okay, no counter spell, just wants to hold on to the coin.
And I think that's what he was thinking about there, is the sequencing on this and where it all fits in.
What a draw here from Gogongsing, and you know, a little bit of a punisher for Tredsred not setting up a counter spell, but he could utilize that counter spell later on if he picks up, say, the clear Tormage.
And Blackwalled Pixie, it's once again, throughout all of Tredsred's lineups, there are a number of differences in his decks versus Gogongsing, and he's once again focused it more towards that stat line of 3-4. You know, he's got Cold Wraith in his deck. He's got the Blackwalled Pixie here, and in his other decks, he's got Nightmare Amalgam and Blackwalled Pixies.
Right. Every single possible deck that he was allowed to play 3-mana 3/4, he could. Even Paladin doesn't allow you. Okay, you could put an odd costed card to even Paladin, but you wouldn't get the hero power benefit. But if he was allowed to, I bet he would put Spider Tank in.
And he is losing this game. You know, the attacker's initiative has mattered, and the life drinkers providing the pressure plus being able.
Dragon's Fury, though?
Oh my.
And there's so many spells that can activate this.
He was all in on this turn, and now he's out of cards. So the benefit he has is that he's got a damage lead. But Tredsred has a counterspell down, and he has Fireball and Pyroblast to basically even up that score. And so with the stat lines in deck, I have to believe that Tredsred from this spot is at an advantage.
Yeah, but the counterspell in this position is so devastating. Normally, you couldn't wait to play Primordial Glyph because you want to get cards drawn.
And that is a major draw for Tredsred. Like, it's pretty tough for a 4-mana 3/3 to be a huge draw, but this is
Nightblade off the top was an amazing top deck.
The big draw for Gogongsing, though, and this is oftentimes how aggressive matchups go. It is a lot of back and forth haymaker-looking plays because you invest so much into your early game that the efficient cards end up mattering so much.
Tredsred ends up ripping the Arcane Missiles.
And returns the favor!
I guess all's well that ends well, right, Admirable?
And Tredsred, I mean, fireballing the Arcane Keysmith does look strange here, but it is a consideration for him.
Yeah.
He's narrowing down what that secret's gonna be, and if this Life Drinker continues to connect, he's in a great spot. And so in his mind, if it's able to just connect and then take out the minion, he's fine with that as well.
There's a lot of things that I want to talk about that decisions were made pretty fast. One is like Tredsred's holding on to Counterspell, which ends up being good here, but a lot worse earlier on to deny an explosive runes. Because if that explosive runes wasn't played from gogongsing on the Blackwell Pixie, you have a 3-mana 3/4 contesting the board.
Yeah.
So but then at the same time, gogongsing didn't ping preemptively in case he needed to weight it down.
Gosh.
And if Tredsred didn't miss with those arcane missiles, he would still keep that 3/3 and lose his Armani Berserker. So there's a lot of nuance that's happening at lightning speed that I wish we had more time to dissect, but right now the important thing is that Tredsred is setting up for this Pyroblast lethal, and gogongsing needs a spell to activate.
That's a spell. So now he needs the Fireball to get counterspelled, and then the Primordial Glyph to find a way to stop Pyroblast.
Yes. But the coin being held for counterspell.
Oh, you're right. So that's just it.
He plays a secret. I believe that was Mana Bind. But Tredsred has mapped out the way to counter this by holding on to the coin the entire time. And a brilliant read here from Tredsred, and now he's going to be able to utilize Pyroblast to end the game. Gogongsing takes off his headset in frustration because he knows that he had all the initiative, a double Mana Worm, Sorcerer's Apprentice, and Arcane Missiles. And because of that awkward start, it kind of set up a very weird line of play on both sides that end up having Tredsred come out as the winner here.
Yeah, I mean, the disastrous arcane missiles from gogongsing led him into a position where he needed to play defense because of he missed that, but it was very inefficient defense. And that really set him together that big chain of events that was kind of a nightmare for him. And ultimately, it was the extra card on Tredsred's side that made a big difference in that matchup. Attacker's initiative matters, but extra options matter a lot when you have very few resources to work with.
Right, and then you factor in the Dragon's Fury off the Primordial Glyph that was able to get onto a counter spell. If it hit any of the 1-mana spells, any of the 2-mana spells, probably a different game, because then maybe gogongsing would have enough damage to use Primordial Glyph to activate the counter spell and then Fireball for the lethal. Because then he would have stuck a 3-mana or 3 damage minion on board, would have gotten there. So there's a huge amount of volatility to this matchup in particular, not only from the opening starts, but also your comeback mechanics. Can explosive runes shut down your opponent's tempo and get enough damage for you to push lethal, or perhaps a discover option change the dynamic?
And that's a lot of times is just what aggressive decks live and die by, is those small percentages and the edges that you can gain throughout the course of the matchup. Sure, in this game, gogongsing saw a lot of unfortunate incidents, but over the long haul, that's not going to be the case that happens there. So I think you're seeing a bit of a rarity where that matchup is concerned. I would say typically gogongsing's favorite going first.
Another thing to consider is that I do believe Tempo Mage is the weakest deck in this matchup in particular, and Tredsred escaped. So now he has to win with his Tempo Mage against Hunter. We're not gonna wait, we're not gonna see that right just yet. If gogongsing can get over this hump, which I think he should have the slight edge because he has more 1-mana plays to out-tempo his opponent. However, Tredsred has the 3-mana 3/4s, and if gogongsing has a hand similar to what happened previously, whereas Odd Hunter was unable to get any board presence whatsoever because it all had kill commands and Unleash the Hounds, then Tredsred's 3/4s will do a lot of work.
I think the 3/4s in this matchup actually might be one of the bigger breaking points as well. You know, with Tredsred being on coin in this one, turn 1, he's looking at facing down a Dire Mole, which is going to get in a significant amount of damage. But in the meantime, Tredsred, you know, a pair of 3/4s to back this up this is a lot of counter pressure that goes on. So he sacrifices a bit of early life in order for sustained board pressure. And in a matchup that's aggressive as this one, is sustained board pressure going to be able to beat outright aggression? I'm not convinced, but I think that Tredsred might have the edge.
I don't know. I think Tredsred not having a very good 1-mana minion to play is a pretty big difference maker, because then it absorbs a little bit of damage from Dire Mole, which activates Arcane Shot to get a very clean kill. For now, it looks like Tredsred's going to have to fight on the board with better statted minions, but he's outnumbered, and that might make all the difference in the world here.
And that's one of the things for me that I find quite interesting, is that Tredsred actually didn't go with a Southsea deckhand on turn 1.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's going to die in this spot, it does put 2 damage onto a Dire Mole, and then it saves you 2 points of damage a lot of times as well. And so when that's the case, he unlocks a turn 4 with an Arcane Shot a lot easier. But I think he's looking more towards having one of these 3/4s fight in combat, and that gives gogongsing an opening here. Now these 3 1-cost minions have connected a lot, and suddenly it's a very different story.
Well, suddenly the game is over. You don't have an opportunity to actually fight back onto the board whatsoever, because the Hunter hero power will essentially just cement this game no matter what Tredsred does.
Yeah.
Tredsred would have to literally rip the Unleash the Hounds But in this spot, he can't. So what he can do is fight back on the board and start the game at 10 health.
Yeah, he's dropping down to just 7 with what's visible, and the Wolf Rider connecting is going to drop him down to 4 life. Yeah. And that's 1 damage and a hero power or 2 turrets. And there's no way for his deck to deliver 29 damage that time.
So again, the series has been going at a breakneck pace, but there's 2 things I want to highlight. One, this is a very unusual matchup because again, these guys are the only people bringing Odd Hunter along with 1 other guy. There's 3 Odd Hunters in the entire field, and 2 of them got matched up in round 1. So you won't see an aggressive lineup matchup like this very often in the playoffs. So this is already unique. Yeah. The second thing is I want something to point out that you said, which is in these aggressive mirrors and matchups, the most important decisions might happen before the first card is played, which is mulligans, or even how you're choosing to utilize coin. You highlight something really important, which was Tredsred's use of the coin for the Firefly and the Dire Mole in that previous game. That set a bunch of things into motion that helped them snowball the victory. And if you don't pay attention to them and you autopilot these aggressive matchups, you might lose the game and you might not know why. You might just think it's draw randomness at that point, but it's really not. Those early game decisions make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, a lot of, every single matchup in Hearthstone has some sort of macro play to it, be it in your deck building or in the way that you're opting to navigate a particular matchup. For aggressive decks, though, when they face mirror matches, a lot more of it comes down to those micro decision plays. And turn 1 is oftentimes a critical turn for a lot of players.
All right, well, we're going to find out what happens in game number 5. Can gogongsing take an upset with Temple Mage over the Odd Hunter, or will Tredsred weird lineup of 3 drops continue to take it home? We'll find out when we return. Tredsred and gogongsing locked at 2 games apiece. 2 players who are playing aggressive lineups of a rare sight to behold in the playoffs this season, as Control has dominated the field, and yet somehow we've picked up an unusual lineup with Blackwalled Pixies and Tanglefur Mystics, and I bet that a lot of people just off those names alone won't even know what those cards do unless you play a lot of arena format. However, Tredsred has put him so much in his lineup, and yet he's 1 game away from taking a round 1 victory over gogongsing, who seems to be warming up his vocals at this point, because right now he needs definitely a lot of work outside of this Mana Worm in order to take this game against Odd Hunter.
Deal that 1, Tredsred. You get an Eaglehorn bow in hand. None of the minions in this deck are touched by 1 damage. Deal that point of damage. He's got to min-max everything in this matchup, because that is what this matchup boils down to. You know, we talk about the micro decisions in aggressive matchups and how much they matter. This Mana Worm is going to require attention from Tredsred at some point, and he has got a fire follow-up to this. And so Tredsred has got to figure out a way to not only stifle this damage, but he's got to figure out a way to deliver counter blow to gogongsing as well. And that is a tall order when gogongsing has got as many burn spells as he does.
The big thing for me is that gogongsing, as he coins out this explosive runes, very nice because he knows that Tredsred is 3 mana heavy. But he also has Arcanologist. When I was thinking about what his plays were in this position, it makes a lot of sense that he wants to coin out this explosive runes. But this Arcanologist follow-up is so big. If you look at percentage of just like on the play win percentage or on the draw win percentage, Arcanologist is up there with Mana Worm. It's definitely behind, but it's also just as important to the deck as much as we meme about Mana Worm being also the most important card.
It's just got such a high amount of value attached to it. A 2-mana 2/3 is already decent, and then when you get to draw a specific style of card from your deck, you pretty much know what you're getting out of it. And so being at 17 here is pretty darn low for all things considered for Tredsred, and a massive pickup for gogongsing. Is able to contest it right away, and Tredsred, unless he wants to suffer a lot more damage and risk the arcane shot being countered. I'm sorry, no, it's a 4/3. I just see all the 3/4s in my head. I was like, here in Tormage is a 3/4.
And apologies for, you know, we're basically casting this at auctioneer pace. We're basically pretending as if every Hearthstone card is on auction. But, you know, these guys are playing so fast, but we're about to come to the resolution of this series. We're going to find out who's going to win very quickly. Given that gogongsing picked up Aluneth, has burn in the hand, Tredsred has a lot of damage to follow up onto the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and no counterspell to prevent it, so this is Huffer. We're basically setting up to the last turn for this series.
And Misha still reasonable here, but Tredsred is not at liberty to play a minion because he's just going to be
but he doesn't need
lethal
to.
threat. Yeah, I know
next turn.
This is crazy to look at. You know, should gogongsing have maybe played this counterspell instead?
Oh,
I mean, he's down to ripping Cinderstorms to hope that this works.
He just needs to eliminate enough to stay alive, but he needs to kill off both minions at this point. No.
So Tredsred is down to 3. Gogongsing needs a burn spell in order to end the game. Wow. Tredsred can't play a minion, and so gogongsing is down to his final draw.
Final card needs Frostbolt or burn.
And that's not it. That's the wrong burn. Gogongsing, just like that. I mean, this match feels like it just started.
I don't even know what happened. The game is over. The series is over. Tredsred off to a lightning fast start. 1-0 in the Swiss. But